الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله وصلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه. أما بعد فإن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله وخير حج محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. يا أيها الإخوة والأخوات أحبة في الله, our brothers and sisters, I love you for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal. Tonight's talk, bi'idhnillah, is the beginning, by the permission of Allah Jalla wa Ala, to discuss a tremendous topic that, by the permission of Allah, before you begin to tackle anything in Islam, before you begin to study any science within Islam, these preliminaries, if you want to call them, if you will, these essentials are very key and paramount for you to truly understand the sacred text of Islam, and that understanding that Islam has its men, and that there are a certain format and there is a certain understanding that must be applied when dealing with the text of the Quran and the Sunnah. So we wanted to use this as a way of an introduction, if you will. Based off the statement of Allah Jalla wa Ala in Surah Al-Isra, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the 17th chapter of the Quran, Allah says, وَلَا تَقْفُ مَا لَيْسَ لَكَ بِهِ عِلْمٌ. Allah Azza wa Jalla, He says, do not follow nothing you have no knowledge of, which indicates clearly to us that we should have what? Knowledge of that which we should have, as Imam Bukhari is famously known to have placed in his Sahih, the chapter hitting which he means al-ilmu qabla qawli wal-amal, that knowledge precedes speech and actions. And he used by way of adilla, that which he uses the istidlal as an evidence for his chapter hitting, is that he brought the verse in Surah Muhammad, where Allah Azza wa Jal says in the 47th chapter of the Quran, فَاعْلَمْ أَنَّهُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهُ وَاسْتَغْفِرْ لِذَنْبِ إِلَى الْآخِرِ هَذِهِ الْآيَةِ. And to the end of this tremendous and blessed verse, Allah Azza wa Jalla, He says, so know, O Muhammad, none has the right to be worshipped except Allah. So know is the point. That's the shahid. Allah Azza wa Jalla told Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, know, meaning have knowledge before anything else. After Allah says have knowledge of La ilaha illallah, after having knowledge of that, Allah Jalla wa Ala says, wastaghfir li dhanbi. Then told him to do an action to seek Allah's forgiveness. So Imam Bukhari, he used this verse to show us that knowledge precedes action, because istighfar is an action. And before the Prophet ﷺ was able to make istighfar, he had to have knowledge of Allah Azza wa Jalla. So we have to have knowledge of the men. We have to have knowledge of the men of this deen, and we have to have knowledge of their understanding of this deen. So this is the reason why we wanted to bring this as a way of an introduction, inshallah. And what is we talking about? The concept of fahmu salaf. You hear the word salaf used a lot, especially in the 21st century now. We hear this word salaf used a lot. Some people use it in a derogatory manner. Some people actually take shots at people who use it. Some people use it in a celebratory meaning. Some people use it in a praiseworthy way. Some people use it in a blind fanatical way. Some people use it in misunderstanding. So, what is the Salaf? We're going to talk about that. Today's talk, we're going to learn who is the Salaf. Sheikh Salih Fawzan Hafidhahullah, he brought a tremendous point in the muhadara, in the lecture that he gave. He said that it's not permissible now. Pay attention to his wording. He said it's not permissible to claim that you follow the Salaf and you don't know, one, who are the Salaf? Two, what is Salafiyya? You don't know these two main components, then it's not permissible for you to ascribe yourself to them. Alright, so that's clear. That's not my statement. It's the statement of Sheikh Salih Fawzan Hafidhahullah. Now, moving on. After understanding this, You want to learn what is the fahm. Why is it so important? Throughout this series, inshallah ta'ala, this series of introduction, we're going to learn why is it so important to have the fahm salaf. All right? Who is the salaf? We're going to learn that tonight. And we're going to learn something about the understanding. Tell you, many of you might have a general understanding. Some of you, Allah has blessed you to have a detailed understanding of who's the salaf is. And what I like to do is, there is a way that we should study, inshallah ta'ala, which is called Kayfa Dirasat Ilm. It's always a tariqah or methodology in a way that you learn knowledge. And knowledge should be built upon evidence. So if you're learning about the salaf, you should know the evidence that is used to support this, so that you will not be one who just, aimlessly blind follow, or you are shackled to the opinion of so-and-so or so-and-so, and you don't even know the evidence. So you want to be careful from that. First and foremost, let's talk about this. So, we all know, without a doubt, if we say the word salaf, we already know that we're talking specifically about the three generations, correct? That's what most people probably think in their head. You're talking about the Prophet ﷺ and his companions. Then you're talking about those students under them, the tabi'een. Then you had the atba'a tabi'een, right? And within that time period, this is what you're talking about. That's one understanding. You're going to learn many more understandings. That's one. So we all got that general understanding, right? Tight. So, it's something you need to know. During the time of these three great, illustrious generations, there was some minor innovations and some key personalities who have deviated from the pure precedent understanding of Islam during that time. Okay? I don't want you to get this confused. This is not contradictory to the hadith that comes in Bukhari in the book of Fitan, that during Umar time, his reign, radiallahu ta'ala anhu, that when he was the door, and when he passed away, that's when innovation was muntashir, was widespread. However, during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, there appear certain individuals who have, like the head of the Khawarij, the Khaysara. He was one of those who actually appeared during the time of the Prophet ﷺ. You have false people who claimed to be prophets during the time of the Prophet ﷺ. You had a female, you had a male who claimed to be a prophet as well. And you had some other individuals with some weird ideologies before all of the other stuff broke out. Okay? During the time of Uthman, okay, you had the beginning of the Shiites. During the time of Ali ibn Abi Talib, you have the Khawarij, the fraction of the Khawarij, and so forth. So you want to pay attention to a lot of these different groups has spread their heads during the three illustrious generations. And a lot of people don't realize that. A lot of them. So this is why it's important you understand a little bit background behind that, so that you can understand why we putting so much emphasis on Fahmu Salaf. What is the understanding of the Salaf, okay? With the passage of time, the Ummah found itself losing much of its dignity and self-respect, okay? And this is true, all right? So even down to today, you have many people, okay? They have distorted the text somewhat, okay? Many people distort the text of Islam. So you have one fraction, a group of people in the 21st century who look at the people who tried to hold on to the first three generations, and then those who try to hold on to them from the A'imma and so forth. They look at them as a certain way as backwards, archaic, out of date, not in tune with the times, fanaticals or fanatic, so forth like that, dogma, blind bigotry. This is what they use. And then you have some other people who, on the other side, they started looking at things that were made impermissible in the deen. They started to look at them as to be made permissible. And certain things such as that were forbidden, they made it permitted. Certain things that were despised innovation, they actually covered it up and started making it seem like it was advisable sunnah as opposed to being what it was. And they actually went away from the understanding of the Salaf. So this is what we see in the time that we live in now. This is not, no one is lying. This is why you got a lot of differing. You have to understand that, and we're going to talk about some of the differing that will occur. And it still occur, and it's going to occur until the Day of Judgment. What does understanding mean? Al-Fahm. Alright? So, when we talk about Fahm, alright, another word for Fahm is fiqh. Faqiha, yafqahu. It's another word, Al-Fahima, yafhamu. Both of them mean the same meaning. Linguistically, it means to understand, to comprehend. All right? All right? Fahm. What does this mean? So first of all, one of the greatest of all favors which one can receive from Allah is the favor of fahm, or understanding. Allah Jalla wa Ala tells us about the difference of opinion which occurred between the Prophet Sulaiman alayhi salatu wasalam and his father Prophet Dawood alayhi salatu wasalam. And Allah Jalla wa Ala says, فَفَهَمْنَاهُ. Pay attention. Allah used the word fahm here. The word fiqh also comes in the Quran as well. But in this verse, Allah said, فَفَهَمْنَاهُ, meaning that He gave Sulaiman the proper understanding of the case that was presented between him and his father. He gave him the proper understanding. Allah Jalla wa Ala says, فَفَهَمْنَاهُ, right? He gave him the understanding. So this word fahm is there. In that instance, Sulaiman was the recipient of this blessings. What is he establishing here for us? He's showing you that fahm is not given easily. Not everybody wants to understand. As we're going to find out, like Ibn al-Qayyim said, even Ibn Taymiyyah, and many of the scholars of the past, you're going to find out that it's so simple why people do not hold on to the correct text. And the main thing boils down is the not properly understanding what Allah and His Messenger intended. It's important. So that case, not understanding properly what Allah and His Messenger say, being ignorant of what Allah and His Messenger say, which can lead to what we call ghulu, extremism, or it can lead to what we call tahrif, distortion, or ta'atil, denying. All of these different things are born out of the asl of jahl. So he's saying, by allowing us to know what? Understanding is a ni'mah from Allah. Henceforth, we all know the hadith. The Prophet ﷺ said what? مَنْ يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ بِخَيْرٍ يُفَقِّهُ فِي الدِّينِ. Whoever Allah wants good for, He gives them what? He gives them fiqh of the deen. He gives them fiqh of the deen. This is something that you should pray that Allah gives you. Fiqh of the deen. Because without fiqh of the deen, you're not properly going to worship Allah. Impossible. Without the proper understanding, you're not going to properly worship Allah. Also, without fiqh of the deen, it's easily to be subjected to superstitions, to bid'ah, innovation, to kufr, all right, to shirk, all of these different outlets that are detrimental and bad to your spiritual growth as well as your physical. You will be subjected to those things if you don't have proper understanding. Tell you. So, Imam Bukhari, he titled a chapter in his Sahih, the chapter of understanding knowledge. He have a chapter in there which he calls the understanding knowledge. And he brings a famous hadith of Ibn Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhuma. And he mentioned the hadith when it says, إِنَّ مِنَ الشَّجَرِ شَجَرَةً, that the Messenger of Allah ﷺ said that indeed amongst the trees there is a tree which resembled a Muslim, كَمِثْلِ الْمُسْلِمِ فَأَرَدْتَ أَنْ أَقُولُ. So Abdullah ibn Umar, he said, I wanted to say that it was the date palm tree. But since I was the youngest of them all, I kept quiet. I wanted to say this, but he was young and they were senior companions, and this is a side benefit from that, you know, those who are lesser in knowledge and even those who are younger in age, when you have those who surpass you, you should show some type of ihtiram, some respect for those who already preceded you in Islam, preceded you in ilm and knowledge. You should allow them the opportunity to be able to precede you in dealing with the issue. So he observed that manner with the Messenger of Allah, even though he knew the answer, and the Prophet had put forth the question. And he says, I kept quiet. And then the Prophet ﷺ said, it is the date palm tree. So in this blessed hadith, which is in Bukhari, the Prophet ﷺ said that there is a tree on the earth that resembles a Muslim, and it's the date palm tree. He was talking about the date palm tree, showing you that the date palm tree is virtuous. In that instant, Ibn Umar radiallahu ta'ala was recipient of what blessing? Fahm, understanding. Furthermore, the Prophet ﷺ would say, مَنْ يُرِدُّ اللَّهُ بِهِ خَيْرٍ يُفَقِّهُ فِي الدِّينِ. Whoever Allah wants good for, He give him understanding of His deen. You've been Muslim 10 years, and you still does not properly understand the type of level that you didn't. If you do not have understanding of Islam, then you need to understand that it's an indication that Allah does not want good for you. Because if you're offering wudu and you don't know how to properly offer wudu, what are the conditions of wudu? These things they're paramount, because an act have to be accepted. In order for that act to be accepted, there have to be certain conditions. This is why we can't stress this enough. Sheikh Salih al-Sheikh said that the average Muslim during the time of Ibn Taymiyyah and the likes, he said that the average Muslim, I'm talking about Amat al-Nas, the average Muslim had a basic understanding of their deen. Now in our time, average Muslims really don't. understand the basics of the things. And we ask Allah Jalla wa'ala to increase His knowledge in me. And this is not to point fingers or put anyone down. It's just to get us to really start moving, inshallah, motivate us. Tell you, who are the Salaf? And what are the uses of this term? Why do we use the word Salaf? And what is the word Salaf, and so forth and so on? All right, so the ulama, they explain that when it comes to words, they have ta'rifat. Words are known by definition, okay? And for those who have the chance to study some of the usul fiqh or go into some of the books of usul fiqh, like An-Nadm Warakat and so forth, you're going to find that the ulama, they mentioned that words have about 3 main definitions. So we're going to look at a word from a linguistic point of view. What does that word mean in the language, okay? And then we're going to look at the word from a istilahan point of view or legislative point of view. In other words, what does that word mean in the science? Or what does that word mean legislatively, what Allah and His Messenger intend by that word? All right? And then there's another understanding, or another way we look at the word. We look at the word traditionally or customarily, which they call urf. How do the people use it in that time? What's the usage of it? We have a famous word that we use here in Pennsylvania and Philly. Some people, they like to hear us when we say it, when we use the word John. So we use the word John, you know, it's used in our slang here in Philadelphia and, you know, I guess in the tri-state rather. But these how they look at the words, all right? So linguistically, he's going to give us the definition of the word Salaf. So the word Salaf consists of 3 letters. If you know Arabic, you know it's Sin, Lam, and Fa. All right? So these 3 letters basically, when they come together, then the linguistic reference is to something that has preceded. In other words, your grandmother is a Salaf. Your grandfather is a Salaf. Those who have preceded you, already? All right? Those who have preceded you, they are what is known as a Salaf linguistically. Or something that has passed. Something that has passed, all right? Something that has preceded, something has passed. That is what it means by Salaf. In the Quran, the word Salaf comes in the Quran 8 times. This word Salaf comes in the Quran 8 times. 5 times on the word Salafa, 2 times on the word Aslafa, and then you have the word that comes actually in Salaf. They come 8 times altogether, all right? So pay attention to that number. We're just going to give you some of the verses and not a lot of them. For example, Allah Azza wa Jalla says in the Quran, Afallahu amma salaf. All right? Allah has forgiven what has passed. The word salaf here means what has passed. Also, Allah Azza wa Jalla says, فَجَعَلْنَاهُمْ سَلَفًا وَمَثَلًا لِلْآخَرِينَ. Allah says, and we have made them a precedent. Salafan. We made them a precedent, meaning that which is preceded, an example to later generations. Okay, this term is used for precedent as Salaf. Allah also says, He says, كُلِّ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا إِن يَنْتَهُوا يُغْفَرُ لَهُم مَا قَدْ سَلَفَ. Say to those who have disbelieved, if they desist from disbelief, their past will be forgiven. Salaf. If they desist from disbelief, Allah Azza wa Jalla says, مَا قَدْ سَلَفَ يُغْفَرُ لَهُم مَا قَدْ سَلَفَ. That word Salaf is there to be forgiven, the term which is used for the past. So by the way, that verse is in Surah Al-Anfal. That last verse I quoted, which is the 8th chapter of the Quran, and it's the 38th ayah. All right? It's the 38th ayah. There are 8 times or 8 places, bi'idhnillah, that is mentioned the word Salaf in the Quran. Similarly, the Prophet ﷺ will use this word as well in the authenticated hadith. He says to Hakim ibn Hizam, after he have embraced Islam, he said, Aslamta ala ma salafa min khayr. The Prophet ﷺ said, you have embraced Islam and your good deeds which preceded are still with you. So here he's referring to this past, previous deeds that he have done, and the word uses of the word Salaf. All right, this hadith is collected by both Bukhari wal Muslim. Also, we know the famous hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, what he said to his daughter, Fatima bint Muhammad. He says, وَأَنَّ النِّعْمَ Salaf, that I am a best, or ni'ma laki salaf, that I am the best salaf for you. I mean, I'm the best predecessor for you. So the word salaf linguistically can mean past, precedence, something like that, something that always preceded you. I hope that's clear. All of us understand that. We probably covered this sometime in our life. Now, what does it mean? It is used, number one, when we talk istilahan, a technical definition for the word salaf. In other words, when the scholars use it, what do they mean? When we see the word salaf used with the scholars in the Islamic text, in context, what does it mean? What are they specifically referring to? Its usage is in reference to one of two things, okay? The first is, it is used in reference to a specific period of history that had passed, all right? A specific period. So sometimes when you read in the works of the scholars, and Sheikh Uthaymeen, he benefited us in his book called Kitab al-Ilm, the book of knowledge. He mentioned that it's important and imperative for the student of knowledge when he study any book that he begin by reading the foreword or reading the muqaddimah, the introduction. And it's very important. Why? Because there are some terminologies and terms that the author might use, which might explain to you that he used some terms and he give you the definitions of those terms. Such is like Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani. For those who have read his book Bulugh al-Maram, they will see that even in that book he brings or coins some phrases or some terms where he give you the definition of what he means when he says that. When he say muttafaqun alayhi, he tells you what he means. Okay, when he says hadith is this, when he says that, he gives you the definition of it. You wouldn't just know that if you go past the introduction and you start reading the book and you start seeing him use certain terms and you don't know what it means. So it's good that a good student will begin by starting that, Sheikh Uthaymeen says, to what? That we know. So we need to know what the terms are being used for. So when the scholars are using the term, sometimes they are talking specifically about a certain time period. Tayyib? And this is taken from the famous hadith of Imran ibn Husayn, where he said, خَيْرُ النَّاسِ قَرْنِي ثُمَّ الَّذِينَ يَلُونَهُمْ ثُمَّ الَّذِينَ يَلُونَهُمْ. All right, this is a beautiful hadith. This hadith is collected by Sahih Muslim. Imam Muslim collected this in the Sahih, and that is the Prophet ﷺ said, خَيْرُ النَّاسِ, the best of the people. All right, قَرْنِي, my generation. Okay, the Prophet ﷺ said the best of the people, my generation. Who is the Prophet ﷺ generation? Hum and the companions. One Allah Ta'ala alayh, right? And he says, ثُمَّ الَّذِينَ يَلُونَهُمْ, then those who will follow them, those who will succeed them, who are they? The tabi'een. ثُمَّ الَّذِينَ يَلُونَهُم, then those who precede them, who are them who come after them, they're the atba' tabi'een, and this known as the three virtuous generations. Okay? طيب. Sometimes the word might be used in that meaning. All right? So the first usage of this term is in reference to a specific era that has preceded. Some other scholars narrowly defined which generation it is which the term Salaf refer to. Some said it specifically refers to the generation of the companions. Others said it specifically refers to the generation of both the companions and the tabi'een. Others have said it specifically refers to the generations from the time of the companions up to the time of Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal. In fact, others have said it refers to all of the generations up to the 500 years after the Hijrah. Okay? This is some of the different understandings of the first term or how it's used. All right? That's why you gotta love knowledge, man. The more you learn knowledge, the more it makes you want to zip your mouth. Because a lot of people, they so quick, they learn something and it's natural, it's human nature. They learn something a certain way and they think that that's the only way it's supposed to be done or can be applied. And when they see someone else doing something contrary to what they have learned, they automatically begin to make inkar. They automatically begin to reject or censor that person. As we've seen in the hadith, which is natural. We've seen in the hadith of Umar ibn al-Khattab, radiallahu ta'ala anhu, where one companion was reciting Surah Al-Furqan. And when he was reciting Surah Al-Furqan, he was reciting in a way that Umar did not hear, because Umar did not learn from the Messenger of Allah Furqan that way. All right, so Umar, he was stern. So he gripped the man up, took the Sahabi, and he dragged him over there to the Messenger of Allah. The Prophet had told him to let him go. He said, "Rather, he's reciting in a way that I haven't heard." He told Umar to recite. He said, "You're correct." And he told the man to recite, and he said, "You're correct." And the Prophet said, "Rather, that the Quran is revealed in what? Sab'atu ahruf." All right, which shows us, my point of bringing this up, it shows that it's natural when we hear something that we don't learn, we automatically get on defense because we didn't learn it that way. But we also have to be mindful that their knowledge gives you the room that there are other ways things can be done. So don't restrict it so much to that. Tell you, all right? So we got that. That's clear, right? However, the vast majority of scholars, both past and present, were of the view that the term Salaf, in fact, in reference to the generation of the companions, the Tabi'een and the generation which came after them, due to the hadith of Imran stated above. What did this tell you and I? So if someone asks you, who are the Salaf? You can literally say and be safe from the hadith of Imran ibn Husayn. This hadith is collected in Sahih Muslim. The name of the Sahaba, the name of the Rawi is Imran ibn Husayn. And what did he say? He said, the Prophet said, Khairun Nas Qarni, the best of the people is my generation, ثُمَّ الَّذِينَ يَلُونَهُمْ, then those who preceded them, ثُمَّ الَّذِينَ يَلُونَهُمْ, then those who preceded them. This is that hadith. You can use this definition specifically for the Salaf, talking about these three generations. طيب. However, you hear the Salaf, as he said, also being applied to like the time of Imam Ahmed, or those scholars before Imam Ahmed, and so forth like that. So they're also termed as the Salaf as well. All right? They don't always mean the companions. Allah Ta'ala alayhi. The second use for the word Salaf is reference to a specific minhaj, which is not specific to an era. Okay? So sometimes when you hear the word Salaf, it might be talking about a madhab, which is synonymous here with minhaj, a methodology. It might be talking about that which is not restricted to a time period. All right? It's restricted mainly on the actions of the Salaf, their beliefs, their statements, their actions, their behavior, their interactions, how they work, how they understood, how they apply. All of that might be incorporated when we use the word Salaf. We can mean that as well. Why is the second understanding also important? Because there were people during the time of the first three greatest generations who were innovators and followers of desires. Examples of this include Dhul Khawaisira. We talked about this during the time of the Prophet ﷺ. That was the first one, or the head, because the Prophet ﷺ said, he told his companion, leave him alone, don't kill him. Right? When he told the Prophet ﷺ, be just, he said, "A'dil ya Muhammad, be just." And the Prophet ﷺ said, what are you? And I'm not the person who fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the most on the earth. And he was telling her to be just in terms when he was distributing the war booty. All right? But the Prophet ﷺ told his companions, don't touch him, because perhaps from his loins they're going to come a group of people who are going to recite the Quran, and it's not going to go past their throats. The ulama said that, meaning they're not going to have no fahm, understanding, and that was the head or the father of the Khawarij. And the Prophet ﷺ said about the Khawarij, he said that they are the dogs of the hellfire. Right? He called them the dogs of the hellfire. And he said, if I was alive during the time when they will emerge, he said, I would deal with them like I think Ad or Thamud was dealt with, Kamakar and Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Clear, right? So, this is why the second one is so important, because you had many people who sprung their heads up. So this is why we hold on to this lifeline, so to speak. We hold on the Fahmu Salaf. Many people were so shaken up when Sheikh Al-Albani rahmatullah ta'ala alayhi, during his time, when he was talking about Salafi, this and that. So everybody kept saying, well, Allah named us Muslims. And they quote the verse in Surah Hajj with Ibrahim. Allah Azza wa Jal mentioned that Ibrahim and before him, Sammahu Muslimin, that he's the one who give you the name or call you Muslims. Allah calls us Muslims in the Quran. A lot of people was in big inferiority because they hear people start saying Salafi, or I'm Salafi, or I'm Salafiyun, or I'm Salaf, you know what I mean? Like that. And people start hearing that Yaw Nisba, that inscription there. And they thought it was a whole new different set being instituted. But the problem is, I'm going to be honest with you, as Sheikh Al-Albani is reported to have said, he reported to have said this, he mentioned how that there is a whole world that we are oblivion to. And when he's talking about a whole world that we are oblivion to, he's talking about in the books. In the Sudurul Kutub, in the books, there is a whole world that we are not privy to, meaning the Arabic books from the ulama. Because we haven't read all of their works. We haven't went into their works. So you don't know whether this term used or not. You know what I'm saying? You don't know how they used the term, or did they ever use the term, or was it? You don't know. So if you don't have that knowledge, he was blessed by Allah Azza wa Jal to read a library. Have you ever seen how big the library was? That wasn't a small library, by the way. Actually, he read mostly all of the books in the library. I hope you understand that. He spent 15 hours a day in the library. So he was going and delving into many of those works, and he wasn't an Arab. That was one of the amazing things for me, that he wasn't an Arab and that he was able to become strong in the Arabic language and understand the speech of the scholars of the past. So there's a whole other world that you don't even know of that exists amongst the works of the ulama. So tayyib, these people have shown their head. And it was like the Khawarij. We just talked about that. Then it was the appearance of the Qadariyya sect. Alright? Sabiq ibn Isl, the Shia. Those people who have shown their head during the time of Umar radiallahu anhu. The large appearance of the Khawarij during the time of Ali radiallahu anhu. The appearance of the Qadariyya sect, those who denied the predestiny, meaning the Qadr, at the hands of Ma'bad al-Juhni during the end of the companions' generation. The likes of Al-Ja'd ibn al-Dirham, the first one who was to be initiated of Kalam. By the way, many of us don't know what that is. Rhetoric, this philosophy stuff. Kalam, right? Coming in with using the intellect over the text. This was the first one. Not Al-Ashri. Now Malik ibn Ashri wasn't the first one. Jah ibn Dirham, he was actually slaughtered. They sacrificed him. Al-Miqsari, and the people of the Sunnah praised him. He was the ruler of that time. And when the time for the sacrifice came out, he says, as for you, you can slaughter your animals, but I'm going to slaughter Ja'd ibn Safra. I'm going to kill him, actually. Because he was actually spreading the idea that Allah Jalla wa'ala did not speak to Moses, and that Ibrahim and Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is not the Khalil of Allah Azza wa Jalla. Tayyib. So, then you had the likes of Wasil ibn Atta, the Mu'tazila, appeared during the first 3 generations. However, these were individuals in however, there was individual isolated cases which did not reflect that blessed era, and their innovations were dealt with and deconstructed appropriately. Thus, when speaking about the understanding of the Salaf, some tend to refer to the Jumhur, the majority of the opinions of the Salaf, or they say Salaf as-Salih, our righteous predecessors, to exclude those aforementioned individual cases. Therefore, whoever was a person of innovation or desire is not classified as being a part of the imitated Salaf, al-Muqtada bihim, even if such a person happened to live in their era. In other words, we don't unrestrictedly place someone because they was during their time to be a part of the Salaf. If they was known to be upon bid'ah innovation, or they was known to be upon desires and so forth, you don't just put them with the Salaf because they lived during the time of the Salaf. You understand? You just don't group them in. They have to be excluded. All right? Is in reference to the methodology, being upon what the first 3 generations were upon terms of belief, acts of worship, and how the texts were approached and applied. Interestingly enough, right, in the Quran, Allah Jalla wa Ala, He says, فَإِنْ أَمِنْتُمْ, He says, فَإِنْ آمِنُوا بِمِثْلِ مَا آمَنْتُ فَقَدْ اهْتَدَوْا. In Surah Al-Baqarah, Allah says, if they believe like how you believe, then they will be guided. This is a strong verse. All right? Who is they? And who is you? So the pronouns being used here, they, Allah Azza wa Jalla is talking about the people who are being addressed as Ibn Kathir, and many of the Mufassirin, they bring that the people that were being addressed during that time was the pagans of the creation, the Arabs and so forth who were being addressed at that time. Allah Azza wa Jalla was saying, if they from the pagans and the Mushrikeen believe like you, and who was you here? Not just the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it was the companions. If they believe like the companions believed, then they will be guided. Which this shows you the authority that Allah has placed with the companions. This shows you this. That if you believe like the companions believe, then you will be guided. So guidance, a prerequisite of guidance, is following the companions. It's amazing that many people were trying to go around this. They would act like those ayahs not even exist, or like they just don't read them. No, they actually exist. If they believe like you believe, then they'll be rightly guided. Allah Azza wa Jalla made it clear. Then He said in another verse, if they follow a way other than the believers, and the believers here again is the companions. You can't get around it, man. You just can't get around it. They try to get around it, but you can't. So He says here, the methodology of what they were upon. What is meant by the term Fahmu Salaf? We get ready to be done, inshallah. He says, the understanding of the Salaf, how can we classify a particular opinion so that all of us are in agreement? One, who is the Salaf? All right? We gave you many different definitions. You should know automatically it's okay and safe to say what? The Salaf is the first 3 generations based on the hadith of Imran ibn Hussein, which is collected by Muslim, that the Prophet ﷺ said the best of the people of my generation, to those who after them and those after them. Tayyib, that's clear. You know that now, right? What are the companions? Right? I'm not asking you the ta'rif of the companions. There are many definitions for the ta'rif of a companion. All right? We're not talking about the definition of a companion, but I want you to say, who are the companions? The companions are divided into 2 categories. All right? It's important for you to understand this. The companions are divided into how many categories? 2. What are they? They are the muhajirin, those who left from Mecca, who migrated and went to Medina, right? And they are known as who? When people in Medina, they are known as the Ansars, okay? Allah Azza wa Jal talks about them in the Quran. There are verses where Allah mentioned about the Muhajirin and the Ansar by names. There are hadiths that the Prophet ﷺ mentioned in Kitab al-Iman that even Sahih Muslim brings in his, Imam Muslim brings in his book, and Imam Bukhari brings in his book about the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ where he mentioned Hubbul Ansar, يعني min alamat al-Iman, that loving the Ansars or loving the Ansars, the helpers of Allah Azza wa Jal, then they are from, that is from the signs of Iman, okay? Having love for the Ansars, those who have given their pledge, those who have supported, and so forth, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. All right, that's the companions, and that's them. And then they had groups of people under them. all right, during that time, which was the Tabi'een. And they have many of those who study from them. And maybe when we get into the next series of this talk, inshallah, you're going to learn, I'm going to mention some of them because he mentioned some of them and understanding that. I wanted to mention that before I finish this because I'm at the end. So I wanted to mention that so we have a clear understanding. The Salaf, specifically the 3 generations, and sometimes the methodology of the Salaf. Both of them are important. Now, those 3 generations consist of the Prophet ﷺ and his companions. His companions are divided into 2 categories. That is the Muhajirin and the Ansars. It is obligatory to have love for both. It is impermissible to speak ill of both. It is impermissible to criticize any of them. It is impermissible to make takfir upon any of them. All right? Some like the Rafida and some of the different Shiite sects, they have made disbelief of some of the companions. It's impermissible to do that. It's impermissible to speak ill of them. It's impermissible to delve into the wars or the fractions that taken place amongst them. Okay? Especially in not understanding that we should not speak. If you're going to speak about it, or I mentioned that you speak about it for historical reference or a reason being brought, but you seek forgiveness for them due to the ayat that comes in Surah Al-Hashr. Tayyib, that becomes clear. All right? Then you have the Ansar. Now, then you have the Tabi'een, those who took that information directly from the companions. And then you have those after them. I want to clarify a shubha that springs up for those people who look at those who study Orthodox Islam, because that's what they call us, people who try to hold on to the first 3 generations or the methodology that we're archaic and that we Orthodox Islam. That's what they're saying, basically, right? So in their Western approach or even in their objective approach, they put forth a shubha, a doubt to you and I. And I want to teach you how to combat this. This is why this is important. Before you study anything in Islam, you need to know who are the men of Islam. This is extremely important. Also, before you study anything in Islam, you need to know how to properly study it. There has to be an understanding to these texts that you begin to open, okay? Now, the important thing is the shubha that they bring is this. They tell you and I that during the time of the companions with Allah Ta'ala alayhim, there was not nothing known as Aqidah as a science. There was not nothing known as fiqh or usul fiqh. There was not nothing known as these different sciences that has developed during their time. Okay? They say that all of this putting together, and guess what? This is a true statement. As far as the science of Aqidah, as far as the science of fiqh, usul fiqh, it wasn't there. It's true. It wasn't put together like that. Tight. But the shubha, the doubt they want to put in me and you is that how can we ascribe ourselves to the Salaf and actually know that this was what they were upon if it wasn't there during their time? That's what they try to get you to see. They implying that. So how can you say you really following the Salaf if they didn't develop these strands that you're quote unquote saying? And they can get you like this if you're not smart and you don't pay attention. First and foremost, by the permission of Allah Jalla wa Ala, there is no doubt that during the time of Ali ibn Abi Talib, it is mentioned that Ad-Du'li, all right, and if those who don't know Ad-Du'li, if you're learning the Arabic language, An-Nahu, especially grammar, then you should know about Ad-Du'li. Ad-Du'li came to Ali ibn Abi Talib, and he heard his daughter make a statement in Arabic. And the way that she mentioned the statement, it was incorrect. And it was saying something actually inappropriate, and it wasn't correct. Because a lot of the times you don't know that the Quran did not have tashkil. It didn't have these vowels or these diacritic marks that we got on them. We didn't have fatha, kasra, or dhamma. We didn't have these things that was there like that, right? So it became important that the beginning or development of the Arabic grammar that has been placed together was during the time of the Caliphate of Ali ibn Abi Talib, all right? Now, what is my point of bringing this up? During the time of the companions with Allah Ta'ala, is not Ali ibn Abi Talib a companion? Right? Did not the need for Arabic grammar, was it not a need for it to be made as a single tool to learn, that it would develop rules pertaining to the Arabic grammar? Sarf, Balaga, so forth and everything like that? Nahwu, so forth, all of these different things. It had to happen. And And it was a good reason for it happening. It was a way of preserving. That does not negate the fact that it's going against something which Allah Jalla wa Ala has prohibited. It's not adding anything to the deen. You have to understand this, all right? It falls under a principle that the ulama mentioned, that whatever is needed to complete the sharia, to complete that which is obligatory, then that itself becomes obligatory. And it falls under the means of what we call masail. It is a means that leads to something that is khayr, okay? And like the setting up of schools and universities. They wasn't during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, there wasn't schools and universities, correct? But is schools and university impermissible in Islam? La. Schools and university are permissible, right? These are things that were needed. And during the time of Umar ibn Khattab, anhu, as we've seen, this is when the schools and universities start to develop. But during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, Abu Bakr, Siddiq, anhu, la, it wasn't there. It wasn't the universities or these schools and things were not brought. So, I want you to understand an important thing. That shubha doesn't hold no weight. That doubt that they're trying to bring doesn't hold no weight. It was a need for these things in order to carry out these things to happen to be systematically, because there were many people who were coming into Islam via they was either coming from different parts, they wasn't a part of that, and by new people coming to Islam, this is why Uthman ibn Affan felt the need to take, this is why Uthman ibn Affan felt the need to do what with the Quran? The Quran was gathered during the time of Abu Bakr. That's when it was gathered. What did he do to the Quran though? Why did he feel the need to, even though it was revealed in Sab'a Ahruf, why did he feel the need to take the Quran and make it the Uthmani script? What was the reason for him to do that? He was the Khalifa. Why did he do that? Because many different foreign people were coming to Islam. And it was causing a lot of confusion with different people when they were reciting and so forth. So there was a need to do it. You have to know how to combat these doubts. When someone come to you and tell you, yeah, the Sahabas didn't do this, so how can we attribute this, that this is really upon them? No, we can attribute because these sciences was a need for them, and they developed, and they do not add anything to the deen. There are people who came in that didn't understand certain things, so they needed to develop these things to make it clear. Tayyib, that becomes clear. Do not get caught up in that. Another shubahat that many people make is that they try to tell you that the Salafis, quote unquote, they quote the companions, the tabi'een, the atba'u tabi'een, and then they quote some of the a'imma, like Bukhari, like Imam Shafi, like the four imams, like many of them, Sufyan al-Thawri, and so forth, and then they skip past 478 years and go right over to Ibn Taymiyyah, right? And they might say this is a doubt to you. Why is there a gap? Why is they skipping past all of this to get to Ibn Taymiyyah? Why is they saying that this is the chain of the Salaf, right? So they use this as a doubt for you and I. And you might say, okay, I hear you. Why is they doing that? That's not a doubt. First and foremost, you have to understand some scholars, their works was not preserved. Some scholars lost a lot of their works. Some scholars, their students didn't preserve their works. Some scholars did not have schools that remained. There were many madhabs, by the way. It's not only Imam Ahmed and the four that we know famously. There were many madhabs. And there were many scholars in their own right that had students that followed them. But not a lot of them preserved their works. So it can be a reason that because we don't have their works preserved, and Allah knows best, we don't have them. It doesn't mean that we exclude and say that Ibn Taymiyyah is the founder of Salafiyah, or that this version of Ibn Taymiyyah or this gap that we throwing away all of that was in between those gaps that you're talking about. Do not get caught up in the shubuhat. Fahm Salaf is important. You cannot study any science. You cannot study the Quran. You cannot study Hadith. You cannot study Mustalah Hadith. You cannot study Usul Sun. You cannot study Usul Fiqh. You cannot study Fiqh. You cannot study anything, inheritance, without Fahm Salaf. Do you understand that? You must have this. So before I begin any class, this is the reason why I wanted to go over this. Okay? Because before we get, you need to know some preliminaries. When we talking about the Salaf, you need to know who they are. When we talking about the Fahm Salaf, you need to understand what we're talking about. And when we talk about the Fahm Salaf, it falls under two things. It falls under the Salaf being the first two generations, and it falls under the manhaj or the methodology and how they understood certain things and how they apply anything. The tatbiq is important of how they apply. That's what we wanted to bring. So what is meant by the Fahm Salaf? How can we classify a particular opinion on an Islamic matter? As being an opinion or even the opinion of the Salaf. Furthermore, what is the nature of the orthodox understanding, which the scholars like Imam Ahmed rahimahullah promoted? This will be the subject, by the permission of Allah, in our next video. We will cover all of those topics, inshallah ta'ala. In the next video, we're going to cover what we just mentioned, so we can have a better understanding, inshallah ta'ala, of what Fahm al-Salaf really mean. Do not be caught up, brothers and sisters, by what you see going on today. Your safety. And there's a principle, I'm going to leave you with this. There's a principle that I want you to understand. Shaykh Uthaymeen, rahmatullah ta'ala alayh, and many of his works on explanations, but in one particular, his explanation to An-Nunniyah by Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah, he mentioned a beautiful point. And this principle is golden. He says that the closer the people are to the time of the Prophet ﷺ and the generation after him and the generation after him, he said their understanding of Islam will be more, and it will be complete, and it will be more better. The closer they are, okay? Not the further. The principle is the closer you are to that time period, the closer you are, the better you're going to be in understanding. What should this tell you? That the further you are away, it should let you know, ain't nowhere in the world we're going to say that somebody who came way years later going to have a better understanding of someone who came closer to the time of those three illustrious generations. We're not going to say that. It's not possible for us to say that. But there are people that do, because they follow their desires. There are people that say, look, we got this, we have that, so we look at this. No! I don't care what you say. I know this principle. All good lies with the Salaf, and all sharr lies with the Khalaf. I understand this principle very well. And if you understand this principle, you don't care if people tell you, come on man, you're robotic, you're restricted, you don't got no room, you can't do this, all you do is stay stuck with these people. La, we don't believe in that. So that's what we wanted to bring today, inshallah ta'ala. Who is the Salaf? The proof for who the Salaf are. What is the usage or the term of the word Salaf? Do not forget that the Salaf, the word Salaf is mentioned 8 times in the Quran. We wanted to bring that, inshallah ta'ala. What was said is incorrect in our translation or in our reading of the words, inshallah ta'ala. It's from ourselves and the shaitan. What was said is correct, it's from Allah Jalla wa ala. Subhanaka Allahumma bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Jazakallahu khairan.